The ocean is a mysterious and wonderful entity. It is vast and expansive, the all-encompassing life-giving body of water that composes the vast majority of our planet's hydrosphere. The Pacific, the Atlantic, the Indian, the Southern and the Arctic. Covering over 139 million square miles, over 70.8% of our planet's surface, the world ocean harbours over 2.5 million species, from the most iconic of aquatic animals to the most mysterious forms of life here on Earth. Since the dawn of humanity, we have stared in wonder at the secrets that the ocean may possess and bared witness to the awe-inspiring power of the seven seas. But despite that, deep beneath the murky blue, one thing remains the same for we humans. The ocean is a dangerous place. So in that case, let's take a look. For the curious amongst you, of course that scene was from 2013's Pacific Rim, written and directed by Guillermo del Toro, and if the ocean was hypothetically as dangerous as the choppy waters of the Pacific Rim, then we better hope that we've got some Jaegers kicking about in some secret underground bunker, ready to save the world at a moment's notice. And yeah, obviously that's a bit of a hyperbole, but it's an awesome movie, and any chance we get, we're going to give it the platform it deserves. The point is though, fiction has long pondered on the many horrors that could hypothetically be lingering at the bottom of the ocean, delivering us some of the greatest works of fantasy and horror fiction. For one reason really, we don't know what's down there, and it makes for a pretty damn good story. The truth of the matter is a lot more simple than that though. You see, the quick and easy answer to this question is that to we humans, the ocean is one of the most dangerous natural forces on the planet because, well, we can't breathe underwater. Alright, show's over folks, we're done here. Of course though, it is a lot more complicated than just that, because if our ancient ancestors wouldn't have faced these many fears early on and thus struck out on a seafaring relationship with the ocean that would manifest the course and the very destination of human civilization, then there's a pretty damn good chance that you and I wouldn't be here asking this question. Or maybe we would, but we'd be lizards or something, who knows. You see, the ocean has been an endless bounty for our species, and throughout history, for those that have been willing to brave the seven seas and the many perilous journeys that it may take, the ultimate reward that the ocean has bestowed upon us has been unparalleled. You see, the ocean is an incredibly dangerous place, that goes without saying. Riptides, tsunamis, sharks, wild algae blooms, swarms of box jellyfish, the amount of aquatic nasties that the ocean can throw at any one given human being is pretty damn staggering, and the truth of the matter is, the varying degrees of these dangers haven't really changed much since the dawn of human history. But for those early human beings who first hollowed out a tree trunk and headed out into the perilous ocean, there was only one option: survive these dangers of the ocean or die. And to do that, for lack of a better phrasing, we're gonna need a bigger boat. You see, the relationship between human and ocean dates back thousands of years, and in ancient maritime history there is evidence of ocean-based trade between civilizations that dates back at least 2 millennia. You see, that's recorded history because the incredible feats of the Austronesian people is even older than that, which perhaps dates back to around 70,000 years ago, where these early population groups crossed narrow inter-island seas, settling in pockets of society along the way. And even more astoundingly than that, there is evidence of stone tools being used on traces left on a rhino skeleton that seems to suggest early hominids crossed the sea and colonized the Philippine island of Luzon as early as 777,000 years ago. Yeah, let that sink in a little bit. Even the early hominids felt compelled to brave the dangers of the ocean to further the species, and it would be pretty safe to assume that braving the seven seas is sort of ingrained in the fabric of being human. Given enough time, you could safely say that human civilization has pretty much perfected the art of floating on the ocean in a boat. And yet still, despite the advancements from a hollowed out tree trunk to some of the most technologically capable floating fortresses that the naval forces across the planet can muster, the ocean has remained just as dangerous to humans as it was 70,000 years ago, and that's only accounting for the dangers that we do know about, because yeah, down in the Mariana Trench, that's anyone's guess. Probably the most present danger are the millions of aquatic creatures that call the ocean their home. Take the pufferfish, for example, a creature that for the most part looks pretty harmless, but is actually one that harbours enough toxin to kill roughly 30 fully grown adults. The unassuming pufferfish contains an amount of tetrodotoxin that is believed to be around 1,200 times more lethal than cyanide. Why? Well, because evolution decided that the best way to prevent yourself from getting eaten by a bigger fish is to literally be made from one of the most potent neurotoxins known to man. The ocean, as the pufferfish knows, is very dangerous. But even the humble pufferfish pales in comparison to another creature, the blue-ringed octopus, a species found in the deep waters of Australia and Japan, whose venom is 10,000 times more lethal than cyanide, and for which there is no known antidote. You see, if you were even bitten by a blue-ringed octopus, you would also never know before it was too late. Their bites are tiny and often painless, and many of their victims won't even realize they've been bitten until respiratory depression and paralysis starts to set in. Yeah, and here we were thinking that great white sharks were the big bad nasties. I mean, they are, and they're certainly one of the most dominant oceanic predators going, but hey, you know how the saying goes, there's always a bigger fish. And that's also without us addressing the fact that despite the myriad of complex and powerful life that the depths of the deep blue sea harbour, the ocean itself is one of the most powerful natural forces on the planet. Obviously it goes without saying, but the devastation that a tsunami can wreak on human civilization cannot ever be understated, as was the case with the 2004 Sumatra disaster that saw a wave of water as tall as 50 meters high that reached 5 kilometers inland and tragically took the lives of nearly 230,000 people. Now, whilst these events are rare enough, the force of the average ocean wave is astonishing. You see, for even a wave as tall as roughly 10 feet, the average pressure asserted by such a force is around 410 tons. That's around 315 small cars endlessly crashing into coastal beaches across the planet, constantly, every single day. And guess what? The tide is high and we humans are still holding on because the current ocean waters are rising, and with the devastating effects of the climate crisis that our planet faces, the dangers of the ocean may quickly become all the more apparent. The global sea level has been rising steadily over the past century, and the rate has increased even quicker still in recent decades. As of 2014, the global sea level was 2.6 inches above the 1993 average. And they continue to rise at a rate of around 1/8 of an inch per year. In the United States alone, almost 40% of the population lives in relatively close proximity to coastal areas, and with consistent flooding, erosion of the shoreline, and the devastating hazards of tropical storms, the dangers of the ocean are rapidly becoming more and more common. One thing remains the same: our relationship with the ocean is just as important to us as it was to our ancient ancestors all of those thousands of years ago. How dangerous it can or will be is simply down to how we treat it. We're gonna need a bigger boat. Life on Earth as we know it would be nothing without the almighty power and serene nobility of our oceans. As they say, the sea is a cruel mistress, and since the dawn of civilization we have relied on her endless bounty to give life and bear witness to the rise and fall of countless empires, always within the mortal reminder that the power of the seven seas is both awesome and incomprehensible to humanity. But despite the massive importance that the oceans have played on our planet, in this hypothetical situation we're going to be pulling the plug on the ocean bed and seeing what our planet would be like without the deep blue sea. Wait, what? I didn't agree to this. It's also important to note that if we did drain the deep blue sea, that we better damn well be prepared to face some ticked off giant squid that wondered where the hell all of his ocean just went. Oh, and also probably a megalodon, yeah, and Cthulhu. More than likely. Anyway, let's try not to think about all of the strange alien nasties that are lurking down on the deepest, dankest, darkest ocean bed, because first we have to figure out how we'd even drain the oceans in the first place, and more importantly, where the hell are we going to put all of this water? Now, obviously this is going to take quite a bit of hypothetical MacGyvering, but fear not, because luckily for us, we have the strange and wonderful power of the human brain. First and foremost, it's important to note that around 97% of all of the Earth's water resides within our oceans, and more than 70% of the surface of our planet is covered in the deep blue sea. In fact, in 2010, a group of scientists and researchers used satellite measurements to estimate the volume of our oceans, and it turned out to be a massive 0.3 billion cubic miles, or 1.332 billion cubic kilometers for the metric system users amongst us. If you can't tell already, that's a hell of a lot of water for us to drain, and it quickly becomes apparent that this isn't exactly the same stroll in the park as draining a bathtub. Rubber duckies aside. It's also important for us to specify the means in which we're draining the oceans, and so in this hypothetical situation we'll go out on a limb and say that suddenly, out of nowhere, a plug hole the size of, I don't know, a London double-decker bus emerges at the bottom of Challenger Deep, the deepest point in the Mariana Trench, which just so happens to be the deepest known point in the entirety of the seven seas. Also, don't worry about where the water's going, let's just say it's dropped into the void of space. Yeah, that works, right? You may also think, uh-oh, that's really bad. We just sprung a leak and this thing is going to be over in the snap of an instant, the planet destroyed, civilization in ruins, humanity wiped off the map forever. But actually, even with a plug hole of that size, it would be nothing in comparison to the unimaginable magnitude of our oceans. The amount of ocean coverage on our planet is absolutely huge, and even going at incredible speeds at a massive rate of drainage, the water level of our planet would drop by less than a centimeter per day. In fact, if our planet did spring a leak, it would actually take hundreds of thousands of years for our oceans to drain, which strangely is kind of a comforting thought, isn't it? But that's no fun at all. So let's say that particular double-decker bus-sized drain started popping up in dozens of different regions of the ocean bed. That'd speed things up a bit, right? Well, actually yes it would, but still, in comparison to the absolutely mammoth volume of our oceans, it would still take a couple of thousand years to drain, and there wouldn't even be any cool apocalyptic whirlpools until at least several hundred years into the draining process, just like how a bathtub doesn't start swirling until more than half of the water has been emptied. Nevertheless, as the ocean bed became ever expanding and that 1.3 billion cubic kilometers of ocean water surged through the planetary plug holes, the landscape of our planet would gradually turn into an oasis of Earth. After just a 50-meter drop in the level of our oceans, the results would be earth-shattering, or, well, earth-revealing? Yeah, I guess. At a drop of 50 meters, islands both small and large such as the UK, New Guinea, Java, Borneo and the islands of Sri Lanka would become completely connected to their neighbours. The Netherlands of Europe, a country that has been at the beck and call of the sea for thousands of years in their attempt to hold it back, would finally be able to gasp their head above water, finally treading on the low sea level surface that has been covered throughout the course of their civilization. At 100 meters drain, things get ever more interesting when a huge new island off the coast of Nova Scotia would be exposed, the former site of the Grand Banks of Newfoundland, a group of previously underwater plateaus that, whilst they were underwater, were considered one of the richest fishing grounds in the world. All those fish though, yeah, they just got sucked down a plug hole. Probably. As the water levels continue to fall, many inland bodies of water such as the Black Sea would cease shrinking and remain vastly unchanged by the drainage of the oceans. This is because many inland bodies of water would cease to be connected to the ocean, and some of their basins would cut off from the rest of the drainage. For the vast majority of these bodies of water, they would eventually become landlocked and just stop draining. So yeah, it's not all doom and gloom. Humanity would still have a water source. Kind of. The waters are surging now though, and at 200 meters, entire new islands would begin to emerge across the Pacific and the majority of the Asian coast. Indonesia, for one, would become a great big blob, all of its islands becoming one mass. At 500 meters, Japan would become connected to Russia via the Korean Peninsula, which is an insane thought in itself, isn't it? With 1 kilometer of our ocean levels gone, New Zealand would suddenly become absolutely huge. It's kind of good news for the Arctic though, kind of, and at 1 kilometer its ocean would be cut off from the rest of the drainage and become isolated for all time, albeit much smaller. Things also get really weird when we reach 3 kilometers worth of drained ocean depth, and suddenly the vast majority of those underwater mid-ocean ridges would become, wow, mountain ranges towering high above the new Earth that they surrounded. Completely new rugged land would become accessible that before was the only privilege of subterranean planet Earth. For the most part, we would pretty much have undeterred access to every shipwreck throughout the course of our civilization's history. Currently it's estimated that anywhere up to 3 million undiscovered shipwrecks lie at the bottom of the ocean bed, so that's a lot of gold to potentially plunder. But the biggest question is, would there be anyone left alive to find it? Now, there is no denying that draining the oceans would undeniably result in the complete collapse of our ecosystem and thus likely the extermination of our species. However, it actually isn't all doom and gloom, because humanity may well be in for a slight chance of survival with this one. Remember those inland oceans I mentioned previously? Well yeah, they could potentially still harbour and support life, albeit life that has pretty much already been brought close to extinction. If a small reduced population could survive close to places such as the Great Lakes of North America, albeit a much smaller version, then there's a chance that pockets of survivors could thrive long enough to discover just exactly what the oceans had left behind. Who knows, given enough time, an entirely new civilization could emerge from the lakes capable of harnessing water during the most impossible of circumstances. Well, given enough time, the Mariana Trench would have been drained completely, potentially waiting for this brave new civilization to plummet its rocky depths and climb on down into the abyss to see what all the fuss was about. They'd be free to roam and explore, perhaps giving light to the one question that our species has always strived to answer. What lies at the bottom of the ocean? Yeah, it's probably Cthulhu, isn't it?
The ocean covers 4/5 of our planet, yet we know so little about what actually lives in this vast expanse of water. Humans have so far been somewhat unable to investigate for themselves due to the crushing pressure of the water and the high risks of death from decompression. We are simply not designed to go that deep. Some say that we know more about space than we do our ocean, and while I would not go that far, there are certainly a lot of questions to be asked. The deepest part of the ocean that we know of is the Mariana Trench, which is situated in the western Pacific Ocean near Guam. This stretch of water is 10,994 meters below sea level, so almost 7 miles down. The Gulf of Mexico is the shallowest ocean at just 3,787 meters deep, and the average sea seems to be around 7,000 meters. Depending on how far you go down totally depends on what kind of life you get. What you need to know is that the further down you get, the colder, darker, and heavier things become. Let's have a look at the more accessible deep sea life living at depths between 3,000 to 5,000 meters. And I don't want to scare you, but some of these creatures look like actual monsters. At a depth of 3,000 feet, sure, you'll meet cute living foliage like the sea lily, but you will also meet the vampire squid. Yes, the vampire squid. This squid can live at very low oxygen areas and navigates the darkness with its huge eye. This squid proportionally has the largest eye in the world, and all the better for seeing you with, my dear. This squid gets its spooky name from its dark flappy arms, which it can wrap around itself like a cloak. You have to love a deep sea honey who can accessorize. Between 2,000 to 5,000 meters, we meet the Fangtooth Fish. 16 centimeters long and with disproportionately big teeth, the fangtooth is perhaps equally terrifying looking as the Pacific viper fish. This fish lives 4,400 meters down and is bioluminescent, aka it glows in the dark. Speaking of creatures that glow in the dark, you should know that actually, deep down there in the cold dark ocean, in what is called the midnight zone, there is a fantastic light show going on that almost all of us will never witness firsthand. At 4,000 meters lives the Atola jellyfish, often called the alarm jellyfish because of its glowing red light. Also found in the deep sea, glowing through the dark, are the crystal jellyfish, the tropical mantis shrimp, and the shining symbiosis, and my favorite, the DOP comb jelly. It's a disco down there. Less of a disco, we have depths of around 5,000 meters or more. A bizarre ghostly looking octopus was spotted at 4,290 meters down, which explorers called Casper. And that's exactly it. Below 5,000 meters, things start to get pretty ghostly. As these creatures have never seen the light, they lack the various pigments needed to show color. In 2016, a ghostly white fish was spotted at an incredible 8,143 meters deep. It is as of yet unidentified, but researchers believe it's some kind of snailfish. Everything else at those depths gets very eerily and tadpole looking. Okay, so what lives in the Mariana Trench, the deepest known part of the ocean? Can it even sustain life? Well, yes actually. Well, how do we know that? Director James Cameron descended 10,898 meters down, but the lowest a submarine has ever been is 10,911 meters. The Challenger Deep mission, containing Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh. They met the surface of the Earth's crust at the bottom of the ocean, and Piccard spotted what he thought was a flatfish, but was likely a sea cucumber, which are found on sea floors worldwide. What else is there? Well, a bunch of albino-looking shrimp. These are officially called amphipods. Other than that, it's a whole load of amoebas and single-cell organisms. So how do the things that live this far down survive? Mostly from sea snow, which isn't as nice as it sounds. What is sea snow? Well, it's falling cells from dead animals higher up in the ocean, like whales. Yum.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Mariana snailfish. The Mariana snailfish is a fish that is found quite deep in the Mariana Trench in a range of 6,198 to 8,076 meters meters deep, or 20,335 to 26,496 feet. This was an important catch too, because it gave researchers a chance to get a look at and further their understanding of what anatomical, physiological, molecular, and genetic adaptations are required for animals who make their home in this extreme environment. Some of the adaptations seen in this fish are things like their transparent skin that lacks pigment, they have certain organs and eggs that are enlarged, their muscles are thinner, and it seems as though they have either little or no ability to see, which makes a lot of sense considering how dark their habitat is. This obviously means that they must hunt for their prey using other senses to detect any movement around them. In our number 9 spot today we have the DUMBO octopus. DUMBO octopuses love to live in the deep sea at depths of at least 13,100 feet or 4,000 meters, which makes the Mariana Trench a perfect home for them. The DUMBO octopus is not just one species but rather a genus, and they are actually the group of deepest living octopuses in the world, but they are also quite rare. These guys were named after the Disney movie Dumbo because of the fact that they have ear-like fins that resemble Dumbo the elephant. They are foraging predators who like to eat pelagic invertebrates that swim just above the sea floor, and they use their ear-like fins to swim while they use their arms to steer. Unfortunately, despite how cute they are, like all animals, the DUMBO octopus has predators it has to look out for. Their predators include things like tunas, sharks, and dolphins, and since the DUMBO octopus lives so deep in the ocean, they are rarely ever accidentally captured in fishing nets, so human activities aren't too much of a threat to them, which is always great news. In our number 8 spot today we have the zombie worm. These worms were first discovered in 2002 when they were living in the bones of a carcass of a dead whale nearly 10,000 feet or 3,000 meters deep in the ocean. The reason these guys have the common name zombie worm is because of the fact that their main food source is those same bones that they were first found living in. These guys love to eat bones, but in their own special way because of the fact that they don't have mouths or stomachs. Instead, they secrete an acid from their skin that dissolves the bones, which frees up the fat and proteins that are trapped inside. The worms then have their symbiotic bacteria that lives inside of them digest the fat and the protein. Here's the thing though, we actually don't know how the nutrients from the bacteria get to the worm. They either digest the bacteria somehow, or there's some sort of process where the nutrients get transferred. While when they were first found, they were chowing down on whale bones, zombie worms are happy to eat any kind of bone that they can come across, and they've actually been observed making a meal out of non-aquatic animal bones that somehow ended up in the deep sea. In our number 7 spot today we have the barreleye. If you haven't seen a barreleye fish before, get ready to have your mind blown, because it is insane to me that a creature that looks like this exists on our Earth. See what I mean? Barreleye fish, which are also known as spookfish, are a collection of fish which all feature very large telescoping eyes that protrude from the head, but that are enclosed in a large transparent dome of soft tissue. These fish are relatively small and are usually found motionless, just hanging out in their preferred depths of somewhere between 600 to 800 meters or 2,000 to 2,600 feet in the ocean. The discovery of this species first came in 1939, but it wasn't until recently in 2004 when someone was actually able to capture a photo of one so that the whole world could see this insanely interesting looking creature. Unfortunately, once taken out of their natural high pressure environment, their fluid filled heads just can't stand our environment up here, so it is definitely better if we just let them be safe and sound in their open home. In our number 6 spot today we have the football fish. The football fish belongs to the family of anglerfish, and they get their name because of the fact that they are shaped like a football. The females of this species are not only significantly larger than the males, but they are also the ones who carry the bioluminescent lure on their heads, which sways back and forth waiting to lure in an unsuspecting prey. Once their prey gets close enough, they will shoot out bioluminescent liquid that will act to temporarily blind the prey so that the football fish can go ahead and swallow it whole. The female of the species can grow to be around 60 centimeters or 24 inches, while the males do not grow larger than 4 centimeters or 1.5 inches. In order to mate, the males will bite onto the females and wait until their skin fuses together. From here, they are now stuck together, but it allows the male the opportunity to fertilize the eggs, and thus, more little football fish. In our number 5 spot today we have the owlfish. Owlfish are a species of deep sea black smelt that get their common name from the fact that they have eyes that are almost as large as their heads. These guys are a fairly common deep sea fish, which obviously means that they're enjoying and doing well in their environment in the depths of the Mariana Trench. These guys can even be found at depths of around 19,685 feet or 6,000 meters. The owlfish's large eyes are definitely part of the reason they have been able to thrive in their deep sea environment, and that is because of the fact that the eyes are able to capture even the most faint glimmer of light, even in the darkest depths of the Mariana Trench. This helps them spot and capture their prey, which is usually things like small crustaceans and jellies, and it also helps them make sure that they don't become the prey. In our number 4 spot today we have spoonworms. Spoonworms are a small group of marine animals that live in burrows in the soft sediment or in rock crevices or under boulders. There are shallow water versions of these guys, but today of course we are talking about the deep sea variety. The spoonworm is a soft-bodied cylindrical animal that is usually seen with a non-retractable proboscis, which is an elongated appendage that comes off the head of the animal. While, like I just mentioned, the spoonworms is non-retractable, they do have the ability to roll it into a spoon-like shape in order to feed, which is of course where their common name comes from. These guys are deposit feeders who like to eat the organic material off of the seafloor, and while different members of the spoonworm family can live at different temperatures, the Mariana Trench variety can clearly withstand the icy cold temperatures. The spoonworm also varies in size quite a bit, with some measuring less than a centimeter or 0.39 of an inch, and some growing to be over a meter or 3.2 feet in length. In our number 3 spot today we have the deep sea lizardfish. These guys are a small family of fish that are most closely related to the telescope fish, and they like to live at a depth of somewhere around 1,600 meters or 5,200 feet, which puts them on the list for one of the deepest living apex predators. They grow to be around 78 centimeters or 31 inches, which makes them a pretty moderately sized fish, and they have a flat head with scary, curved, barbed teeth, which definitely helps with their whole predator persona. These guys are also vicious, as they will eat anything that comes in their way, and that even includes other fish of their own kind. Deep sea lizardfish throughout the years of evolution have been able to adapt to their harsh environment as well as their low population density in a few ways. First, to do with the low population numbers, deep sea lizardfish all have both male and female reproductive organs, which allows them more opportunities for reproduction. The other cool thing that shows how they have adapted to their habitat is how they have large eyes with large pupils. This is because they have quite good eyes that allow them to see any residual or bioluminescent light that you don't get often in the deep, dark Mariana Trench, and this is of course super important for their prey detection abilities. In our number 2 spot today we have basket stars. Basket stars are like the Mariana Trench cousin of starfish, and when you see them, you can totally understand why. These guys have that same main kind of disc that you see on a starfish, but rather than 5 short, stiff arms, these guys have 5 long, slender, flexible arms that all branch out from themselves repeatedly to form even more tiny little arms, with the last branch usually ending up curled. There's no real rhyme or reason for the shapes of basket stars, as it just depends on how they grow, so while some look beautiful and almost like a webbing of lace, there are some that look absolutely chaotic. You know what they say, no 2 basket stars are the same. I don't think anyone has ever said that, but we're gonna start. Basket stars are able to navigate around the seafloor by wiggling their arms around. They also have the ability to curl into a ball when they're feeling threatened by predators. They also do eat, as they have a mouth located on the underside of their disc, and they prefer to eat things like krill, small crustaceans, and zooplankton. We have made it all the way to our number 1 spot with sea pigs. These guys are a genus of deep sea cucumbers, and they have enlarged tube feet that appear kind of like little legs. They move through the top layer of sediment on the seafloor as they scavenge for their next meal, as they eat by extracting organic particles from the deep sea mud. They like to live at depths of around 1,200 to 5,000 meters, or 3,937 to 16,404 feet, and they have been seen to have a strong preference for rich organic food that has freshly fallen from the surface of the ocean. Sea pigs tend to measure somewhere around 15 centimeters long, long or 4 to 6 inches, and they have their own natural defense mechanism, and that is the fact that their skin contains a toxic chemical that is poisonous to other creatures, making it a dangerous meal to attempt. Sea pigs are also known to host different parasitic invertebrates, but sometimes the relationship is commensal. Like, sometimes they like to provide shelter for juvenile crabs, which really benefits the crab because it keeps them safe from predators by having a nice little homey shelter. Sea pigs are another one of those creatures that is designed specifically for the deep sea environment, and unfortunately, when brought up to the surface, they disintegrate. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the boulder star coral. Boulder star coral is one of the most important ingredients to reef building, so it is integral to the underwater ecosystem of the Bermuda Triangle, but unfortunately, despite that, it is currently endangered. This coral is sprouted from closely packed nodules, and it develops into massive clumps with uneven surfaces, or sometimes into plates. This kind of coral grows up to 40% larger than other coral species, and they are usually either an orange-brown, greenish-brown, or grayish-brown color. Because of infectious disease, hurricane damage, as well as human interference, it is believed that the boulder star coral population has decreased by an insane 50% since the 1990s. That's a massive drop in a very short period of time. Hopefully something can be done to help save the boulder star coral before it is just simply too late. In our number 9 spot today, we have the NASSAU grouper. This species of fish loves to live near reefs, and in fact it is one of the largest fish that can be found around coral reefs. These fish are quite solitary and they feed only in the daytime, mostly on things like small crabs and lobsters. These guys have a super large mouth that they use to basically inhale their prey rather than the traditional hunting methods. These fish spawn in December or January, always around the time of a full moon and always in the same location. During the full moon, guided by the light that it gives off, huge numbers of these fish all cluster together in order to mate, which produces a mass spawning. Depending on the depth that these fish live at, they have different coloring, but most can be found with a stripe that resembles a tuning fork on their heads behind their eyes, which makes them look like they could be a fish belonging to King Triton himself. In our number 8 spot today, we have witchcraft. This is less of a story about what was found in the Bermuda Triangle and more of a story about what weirdly couldn't be found. On December 22nd, 1967, a cabin cruiser called Witchcraft left from Miami with 2 people on board. The 2 men were taking a trip so that they could enjoy the Christmas lights on a 23-foot luxury yacht. Truly living the dream. That all changed very quickly, however, when the men were just 1 mile offshore and the Coast Guard received a call from the captain stating that they had struck something. He said that there was no substantial damage, but still, hitting something is usually not great. The Coast Guard set out immediately to help tow the ship back to shore, and it didn't even take 20 minutes for him to arrive, but when he got to the location, he couldn't spot Witchcraft anywhere. The area that was indicated as the ship's location was completely deserted, and there was no indication that anyone had even been there recently. What is extra strange about this is that not only was the ship apparently virtually unsinkable, but there were also numerous flotation devices and life rafts, as well as emergency equipment like flares and distress signals. No one ever saw any sign of them being used, and the ship was just gone. Officials searched hundreds of square miles in the next few days, but no one has ever found any sign of the Witchcraft. In our number 7 spot today, we have the scalloped hammerhead shark. These sharks of course belong to the hammerhead family, and the main feature is their oddly shaped heads. These guys are a coastal pelagic species, and their eyes and nostrils can be found at the ends of the tips of their head extensions. These sharks like to use the shore as a breeding ground, and their young have an incredibly high metabolic rate, which means that they need a ton of food or else they will starve. These guys are quite notable for their large and complex brains. They have quite high levels of cognitive capabilities, they're socially intelligent, they have complex migratory patterns and habitat relationships, and they're quite athletic and clever when it comes to capturing prey. Great, nothing better than a super smart, extremely hungry shark. Their brains are great for the species in a multitude of ways, of course, but especially in terms of reproduction, because their social intelligence helps them seek out the fittest members of the species to procreate with. Unfortunately, as of this year, however, the scalloped hammerhead shark is now listed as critically endangered, with the main cause for population decline being overfishing. They're overharvested because of their large size, as well as the fact that apparently their fins have a high fin needle content, and so they are sold for $100 to $120 US per kilogram. In our number 6 spot today we have the European eel. These guys are of course a species of eel, and they usually grow to be around 60 to 80 centimeters or 2 to 2.5 feet, but they have been found measuring up to 1.5 meters or 4 feet 11 inches, which is a bit of a terrifying thought. One super weird thing about these guys is that we actually don't know what their lifespan is like in the wild. Captive specimens have lived for over 80 years, with one known as the Brantivik eel living in the well of a family home, and that one lived for 150 years. The European eel is currently critically endangered, and it is said that since the 1970s the number of eels reaching their migration destination has declined by 90%. The factors contributing to this are things like overfishing, parasites, and barriers to migration like hydroelectric dams. To help save these eels, there have been a few breeding projects created, and one that was created attempted to help them breed by simulating the 6,500 kilometer or 4,000 mile migratory journey with a swimming machine. The news of any species being endangered is a tragedy, but it really is nice to hear of things that are actively being done to help. In our number 5 spot today we have the SS COTOPAXI. This one is a little different than the others on today's list, but I really had to include it because it is so wild. So rather than a weird thing found in the Bermuda Triangle, this is one that got lost in the Bermuda Triangle, but then was found a whopping 95 years later. The SS COTOPAXI set sail on November 29th, 1925 from Charleston, South Carolina with a cargo of coal, and it was on the way to Havana, Cuba. During its trip directly through the triangle, however, it completely vanished with 32 people on board, and for years its fate remained a mystery. That was until very recently. The wreck of the SS COTOPAXI was actually found around 15 years ago, but it wasn't identified until just last year. The wreck was found at the bottom of the ocean around 35 miles from St. Augustine, Florida, which lies just outside of the Bermuda Triangle. With the discovery of the wreck, a cause for the disappearance has been able to be determined, which are things like negligence, bad maintenance, and bad weather. It was also learned that the ship had sent a distress call shortly before it went down, which helped researchers be able to locate where the wreck initially happened. So while this was a mystery for quite a while, it is very cool to see the answers finally coming to light. In our number 4 spot today we have the Bahamian HUTIA. This large rodent is one of the land animals that finds its home on the land surrounding the Bermuda Triangle. Its natural habitats are subtropical lowland areas, and the HUTIA is a kind of rat-like rodent with a very short tail. They grow to be somewhere around 60 centimeters or 24 inches, and they vary in color between black, brown, gray, white, or a sort of reddish color. These animals are nocturnal and they remain underground during the day. They are able to climb trees, but they prefer to forage on the ground for things like leaves, shoots, fruit, nuts, and bark. These guys are actually endemic to the Bahamas, so you won't be able to find them anywhere else on Earth. For a while it was believed that this species was actually extinct, but that changed in 1966 when a biologist found a small population in an uninhabited area on an island. The Plana Cays are currently the last natural habitat for these guys, however, and they are the home of the last surviving population. In our number 3 spot today we have the Ellen Austin. In 1881, the 210-foot long Ellen Austin ship was going to New York from London when she stumbled upon a derelict near the Bermuda Triangle. The unidentified drifter seemed perfectly normal, aside from the fact that it was missing its crew. Captain Baker of the Ellen Austin asked to observe the unoccupied ship for 2 days to make sure that he wasn't being coaxed into a trap, but after 2 days with no response from the ship, the captain entered the abandoned vessel with his crew to find the well-packed shipment and no sign of the crew. In order to tow this lost vessel back to land with the Ellen Austin, Captain Baker placed a great crew on the ship and they set sail together. After 2 days on calm waters together, bad weather ended up separating the ships, and the one that had been found adrift vanished. Days after the storm passed, it is said that Captain Baker's lookout could spot the ship, but said that it was once again now floating aimlessly. The Ellen Austin sailed for hours to find the ship adrift, but once they did, it was found again that no one was on board. This is a mystery that has yet to be totally solved, but it certainly is a very compelling one. Why do all of the most seemingly strange things happen in or near the Bermuda Triangle? Was this ship cursed or destined to float along the seas as a ghost ghost ship forever? In our number 2 spot today we have the Portuguese man-o-war. These guys are often mistaken for jellyfish, and while they are closely related, these guys are a family of their own. The super interesting thing about these creatures is that they are siphonophores, which means that they are comprised of a colony of specialized, genetically identical individuals called zooids with all various forms and functions. These guys are found in tropical and subtropical seas, so of course the Bermuda Triangle is a great home for them, and they are propelled by either wind or ocean currents alone. These guys can be recognized by their balloon-like float, which can be pink, blue, or violet. Under the float, the man-o-war has tentacles and polyps that are super long, growing to an average of 30 feet and being able to extend 100 feet. These tentacles are where things get a bit dicey, however, as they are full of stinging nematocysts, which are designed to deliver venom that is capable of killing their prey. Luckily, the man-o-war sting is rarely deadly to people, but rarely does not mean impossible. It will, however, be extremely painful and can cause large welts on exposed skin. In our number 1 spot today we have a USO. Daryl Miklos is an explorer who has been using secret maps that were created by his friend, NASA astronaut Gordon Cooper, in an attempt to find shipwrecks. On one of his more recent explorations, he was using maps that were put together by Gordon in the 1960s, which helped identify more than 100 magnetic anomalies in the sea. When Daryl dove down to explore at a location near the Bahamas within the Bermuda Triangle, he thought he was going to find an ancient shipwreck, but he may have found so much more. He found a bizarre structure unlike anything he had ever seen before. The unidentified object has huge obtrusions sticking out from its sides, and some are now calling it an alien spaceship. Whatever this object is, it is covered in coral that is believed to be hundreds, if not thousands of years old, so it's obvious that whatever it is, it's been down there for quite some time. Daryl has said there's identical formations in 3 different areas, and they don't look nature-made. They don't look man-made. Certainly nothing I've ever seen based on my experience, and I have years of experience at doing this. We've identified multiple different types of shipwreck materials. This doesn't match or look anything like that. Let me know down below in the comments what you think this could be. Maybe aliens were visiting Earth thousands of years ago? How would we know?